All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry. Good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Aaron Davis. This is the Unemployment Series, and I'm happy to be here with you today. Today, we're hopefully going to provide some quality content for people who are out there seeking jobs and who are currently dealing with this turbulent job market that we have right now. I'm going to bring on my special guest for today. His name is Robert Becker, and I'm going to bring him in and allow him to introduce himself and his background.
Perfect. Thanks, Aaron. Well, thanks for having me. I was saying I'm new to these live streams, so very excited to be here. And, in terms of my background, so Robert Becker, I'm sitting here in Chicago, and I've been doing recruitment and executive search for about 20 years, mainly in the Chicago market, a lot of national searches as well. But, for the last 10 years, I've had my own firm. We were Mayland Hughes for about 9.5 of those, recently rebranded to Hughes Partners. And then previous to that, I was internal at BMO Harris Bank. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with BMO, and was on their talent acquisition team leading North America corporate areas and capital markets. And then prior to that, I cut my teeth in recruiting at Michael Page International, very large global firm, publicly traded, and smaller office in Chicago here. There are maybe 13 of us in the office, and led the financial services team for about a year and a half. And then obviously kind of went on from there. But I actually started my career as a business development professional at a boutique investment bank. So had a little bit of experience in the industry, moved over to the search side, which I think added a little credibility. But it was just nice to be internal at a bank. Obviously, I've had my own firm for the last 10 years. So the consulting side, the internal side, and on the executive search side. So happy to be a resource here and help anybody that might be looking for a job in the market right now. And absolutely, it's certainly a turbulent market. It's just a matter of setting those expectations and how to approach the market to really highlight yourself. So again, happy to answer any questions and see where the conversation goes.
Certainly, and we'll get right into it. I know one of the first things that I definitely wanted to ask as a hiring manager, and especially one with the experience as in depth as yours, is what do you see the job market actually looking like from someone in your chair right now, in the hiring manager or the recruiter's position, and how different is it from what you believe candidates may be experiencing right now?
Yeah, good question. So the biggest difference I see from a hiring manager and what they're seeing in the job market and a candidate, I think is just expectations, because hiring managers are looking for very specific skill sets. And a lot of candidates kind of go in thinking, I have that exact skill set. Why am I not moving forward in the process? And you have to remember that they're looking at a lot of other people with the exact same experience as you. So, what's going to make you stand out? And I think hiring managers just have an elevated level of expectation thinking, with all the tools out there and AI and how we can reach people, that everybody should be interested in the job. That's not always the case. But I actually had an interesting conversation with somebody last week. They said they posted a job online. They had 500 online applications. They narrowed it down to 8 people that they interviewed, and they hired one person. So that's 499 people that are looking around saying, why didn't I get the job? And it's just that competitive right now. And I think the best time to find a new job is when you already have a good job. And so if somebody hasn't been, looking for a long time, I think a lot of hiring managers just say, why are they not working right now? And it just adds a lot of skepticism to their approach. And so you just want to hit that head on, if you're, not working right now, but you're going up against people that are at direct competitors doing the exact job that they want. And so you just have to know how to phrase your background and just try and push yourself through the process, because 500 down to one, I mean, the odds are just not in your favor. So how do you stand out? And I always say, if you see something online, that's great, but pick up the phone, try and call the person who's actually doing the hiring and making that hiring decision. Try and stick out any way possible, because that 500 down to one, you at least want to be in the final group if you can. And then at that point, it's, do I work well with this person? So, it's just a dogfight to get in front of the hiring managers. And, that's why people have good resumes, obviously, but a resume is just a means to a conversation. And then you really have to highlight your experience when you're in front of them. So again, I think the expectations have shifted with just the advancements of technology. And from a candidate standpoint, it's so easy to just apply to stuff and apply to 20 different jobs at once. That's not the way to go about a job search. I try and tell people take it one job at a time, do the research, focus on the person, focus on the company, and have more of a sniper approach than a shotgun approach. Because if you're hitting the AI apply button online, which is just such a waste of time most of the time, companies see that it was an automatic apply. And for me, if I see somebody that auto applied, not that I won't consider them, but it puts you in a different category, as if opposed to somebody sending you an email, really personalizing it, putting some effort into it. 5 minutes of effort as opposed to 5 seconds of just auto apply, makes a pretty big difference. So again, I think it's the expectations on both sides and trying to meet in the middle on those.
And that's that's one of the dynamics that I definitely wanted to get a little deeper into when it comes to there's this battle I think that a lot of job seekers have right now when it comes to, of course, as you mentioned, the competition. There's 500 resumes for one position. First, you got to figure out how to stand out amongst all those resumes.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part of it is, you state that you should have a sniper's approach, which I get to an extent, but when there's only a finite amount of jobs available right now, and then that in your industry there's been a string of layoffs from company to company, and so you're competing essentially with all these people who have been either recently laid off or have been in the in the job market for the last 6 months plus. It's like, how can you compete with that and using a sniper's approach and really make yourself competitive and stand out at the same time? It's like it's all we feel like. I think from a job seekers, we're playing a numbers game at this point,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, okay, I just want to get my name in front of somebody so that I can have that conversation. And I think a lot of the other challenges that you spoke of, like say for example, I remember early in my days that, hey, we used to go up and hand our resume to people and have those conversations and talk to people. Now of course, they do have the AI applies or the easy applies if you have your resume already uploaded, and it makes it a little easier to submit your name. However, how are you making yourself stand out, and what other ways do you recommend from that standpoint to stand out? Because a lot of times these companies won't even let you in the door to have a conversation with somebody. I mean, of course, they've got other things going on, especially if it's a company that or an industry that's local to you, and you're like, hey, I want to go work here. I know there's a position available. I've seen it online. I wonder if I walk down to that office, will they give me a time of day? And likely, you probably won't even get into the building. And so I think a lot of people feel frustrated from that standpoint. Is like, hey, I'm available. I've applied. I've got my resume. I feel like I'm highly qualified for this position, but how do I get myself in front of somebody to let them know that? And when I'm trying to compete amongst 400 other resumes that are very similar or applicable to
Mm-hmm.
the application itself.
Well, just getting in front of the people, that's the hardest part, right? I mean, if you have hundreds of people that you're competing against just to get that initial interview, I always tell people look at the resume and look at the job description, and then you have to match up those keywords. As trivial as that sounds, that's where their internal CRM is just going to match that up and say, based off of the job description, the people that applied, here's the top 10 matches, right? And the more you can match that language, you just rise to the top there. That's kind of step number one. But if they're just not willing to let you in the door, as you said, one, you probably know somebody at that company. If it's a big enough company, work your network and just call around and say, do you know anybody there? An internal referral, it's not going to get you hired by any means, but it just puts you in another category that you want to be in, because people feel obligated to give those folks a shot because they feel indebted to the colleague that recommended them sometimes. You have to be careful though, because you want to be mindful of who you attach your name to, assuming they're well liked at the company, obviously. But to get in front of them, I mean, you have to follow the company. Look at recent press releases. Look at what the CEO is doing. If they've been on any podcasts, if they've made any announcements, and reference that in an email or reference that on a phone call, as opposed to just saying, "Hey, I think I'm a great fit for the job." Well, no kidding. So are 50 other people in line. But if you say, "Hey, I saw you guys just signed, a new deal, and it grew the portfolio from 500 million to 600 million in terms of a revolver. Why don't we, sit down? My book, I think, could add in terms of the industry overlap." Just be very specific, because the more that the person can envision you in the role at first, the more they're going to say, "Well, I'll give them a shot if they've done all this research. I want to hear them out because I think they have some value to add here." So don't just go in and say, "Hey, I've got the experience, you should interview me." That approach is never going to work. I would almost take the opposite approach and say, "This is what you're doing and how you're growing. This is how my experience can add value in this very specific way. I don't know if you guys are still open to looking at candidates for the job, but this would be my number one choice. Is this something you're willing to have a conversation about?" And if you can position yourself as the industry expert or having that expertise, it solves the problem that they have, because that's why they're posting a job. They have a problem. And if you have the skills to solve that problem, you want to focus on that aspect of it. So, don't just say, "I'm looking for a job." Say, "Let me show you how I can solve your problem," and be very specific. And then you're more likely for them to at least give you an opportunity. I mean, the whole point is to get in front of a hiring team, to get in front of an internal recruiter, to get in front of the company and say, "This is the path that I've been on. This is how I can add value to your company in the next year. How do you see me, accomplishing XYZ at the company? What skills do you think I need to work on? What projects are we going to work on together?" Just envision yourself working in that role. And the more you externalize that, the more that they're going to realize that. So, there's obviously ways you can reach out to people on LinkedIn. You could just, send blind emails. I say just pick up the phone. It sounds ridiculous to say, but very few people just pick up the phone and say, "I saw you guys are looking for XYZ position. I have that background. If you have 30 seconds, I'd love to just tell you why I think, I might be interested in the role, and vice versa. Great. Here's 30 seconds. Well, off of this quick conversation, do you think it makes sense to come in and talk more in person?" They're most likely going to say yes. So again, just pick up the phone. I mean, I can't remember the last great email I got, but I can usually remember the last great phone call I got. So, it's just a little more memorable, and you're going to stand out. So you have to think of creative ways just to get in front of them.
No, I can appreciate that because when I think about it, just basically doing the extra 5 to 10 minutes of extra due diligence on the position itself, on who the hiring manager might be. When you say pick up the phone, I think of that too because it kind of takes me back to the early days of my career as well, of picking up the phone, passing out resumes, trying to get people to, communicate with you in whatever context that looks like. But now almost feels, I see it. I'm not going to say I don't see it at all,
Mm-hmm.
but I say it's harder to find somebody's phone number than it is their email address now.
Yeah, good point.
And I
And
realize that it's
the
not
bad thing
always the
too
case,
is,
but
yeah, if you call into a company now, it's very hard to get somebody on the phone. That's just the bottom line. You would be shocked though. I mean, we have a tool that almost, it sounds kind of creepy, but you can just put in somebody's LinkedIn profile, their name, the company where they're at, and then you click a button and it scans the entire web. It will give us their cell phone number. It will give us personal email, work email. There are tools out there that do that. But if you just manually type in somebody's name, cell phone, you'd be shocked how easy it is to get somebody's cell phone number. And if you can't find that, just call in the company and just leave a voicemail. Whether you talk to them or not, it's the effort that it's showing. And if other people are not making that effort, that's half the battle. It's just 80% of success. It's just showing up. So if you send the email, if you write a personal letter, if you do a phone call, if you meet with them outside the office, if you try and deliver donuts and hand out your resume, whatever people are doing, they appreciate the effort more than anything. But I wanted to go back to something that you mentioned, because applying to a bunch of jobs you don't want to work at all those companies. And I know people say, I need a job. I applied to 50 companies. I'm thinking, there's no way you are a fit culturally for all 50 of those. I would take the other approach and say, where are the top 15 to 20 companies in your market that you want to focus on? Because when they have a hiring need, if you miss it in a week window, it's gone, sometimes 2 or 3 days. And so if you target specific companies and say, I know this team leader is always looking for salespeople, or this compliance person, might be looking for a deputy. Whenever that role comes up, you want to be top of mind. So just go after those top employers in your market, reach out to your future or potential boss and say, I know there's nothing right now, but here's my background. If anything does come up, please consider me, because that's an A+ place to work. And you're much more likely to get excited about that as opposed to applying for 50 different companies. And then, sure, you might get some interviews, but at the end of that process, you might say, what am I doing? I don't want to work here. And so I think you have to focus on A+ companies, not just finding some regular old job, or else you're just going to bounce around every 6 months. And that's even worse for the career. So there's different avenues to take, but it's just a grueling process. I mean, finding a job is a full-time job in itself.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the tough part about it. And that kind of leads into my next question, which is the resume itself. And I know to a certain extent we gotta make it, clear. And from a marketing standpoint, I understand the value of, keywords and of course, the emergence of AI in some of these filtering processes. But from your standpoint, as a recruiter or hiring manager, what do you see as some of the biggest mistakes on resumes that immediately knock someone out of consideration? Like, what do you see as the biggest red flags or biggest issues that are hindering people from getting to that next step, making that in person?
Yeah, and resumes, you'd be very surprised to see what systems pick up and don't pick up, because it's something called a resume parsing system, and there's only three, I think, or maybe four large resume parsing companies out there, and it will scan your resume and put that into the system. If you have some crazy format or a bunch of weird colors on it, that's not the time to get creative. Your resume should be black and white. It should be name at the top. Don't put your personal address. Just put the city that you live in, your phone number, and your email. Do not use the word I in a resume. Use action words. So if I open up a resume and I see I did this, I did that, that's just a lack of self-awareness of not doing research of how people are presenting their background, number one. Never put references available on request. We know that we can always call references. It just wastes valuable pages or space on your resume. And then I think the other thing is you have to put qualitative information. You don't just want a bunch of fluff words on there. Don't say, I managed a team and increased sales. That tells them nothing. Say, I managed a team of 7 sales professionals and we beat our revenue targets by 85% in the last 6 months. That's way more informative than just I managed a team and hit our goals. So there's ways to stand out like that. But resumes, you want to keep just very direct. I've seen people put weird quotes on their resume and thinking they're funny. Just take those off completely. Some people will be very trying to think of the best word. They're very hesitant to put their hobbies and interests on there. I have hired people based off of hobbies and interests, which sounds ridiculous, I know, but like if somebody's an Eagle Scout, I love to see that. They accomplished something that took a very long time to get through. If like a certain sports team, great. Maybe that's my favorite team too. Now we have a talking point in the interview. So don't be afraid to put a one line at the bottom of what those interests are, but don't go crazy and make it a whole paragraph, obviously. But I think there's certain ways where when people are looking at a resume, when I open up a resume and I'm spending 5 or 6 seconds on it, I can tell very quickly if I want to move forward and have a phone call, right? If you bury that information deep in there, they're never going to get to it. So recruiters will look at current company you're working at, your job title, and how long you've been there, and the first bullet point underneath that. And if that first bullet point isn't something impactful, it's not going to grab our attention. And so the most important and impressive thing that you do in each job should be that first bullet point, no matter what. And don't jumble it to make it look like I've worked at this company for from 2014 to 2025, and then 2023 to 2024 I did this position, but at the same company. Don't put a bunch of different dates on there. If you've been at one company for 10 years, put 2016 to present, and then list the jobs you've had underneath. And so it's the little tricks like that that you want to make sure that people know you've got good tenure, you have the skill set. What are the major bullet points? What's the action word? Don't say, I collaborated with teammates to get projects done. Say, collaborated with 4 teammates to accomplish XYZ project, 2 months ahead of deadline. So I think the more detail you can put, the better, but don't waste it with filler space. If it's not important, don't put it. And a lot of people, I think, the older you, I shouldn't say older, the more experience that you have, a lot of people tend to say, well, maybe there's age discrimination or age bias. How much should I really put on my resume? Do I put my graduation year? Do I put the full 30 years of experience or maybe just the last 10? A lot of folks will put previous experience and then just list the companies and maybe the years that they worked there. That's completely fine. If it has nothing to do with that job that you're applying for, nobody's really going to mind. They're much more focused on what are you currently doing and how can that transition into the role that we have and solve the current issue. Because AI is a great example, right? You can't have 20 years of AI experience. That's just not realistic. But if you say for the last 3 years, this is what I've been doing in that space, and you're applying for a job that has to leverage that experience, anything before that is a culmination to get to that role that you're in right now. So highlight the role that you're in right now. But again, we see so many blunders on resumes. You have to treat it like a legal document, format it appropriately. Don't put your personal address on there. That's such a pet peeve. Don't put a photo on there. If somebody puts a photo on their resume of themselves, I immediately think they live in Europe because that's a common practice overseas. I've seen QR codes. I'm not a fan of those unless it's just a link to your LinkedIn profile. We'll see that every now and then. But, it's not the time to get cute on a resume. It's the time to share your information and then explain it in person.
Certainly. And you touched on a few things that I definitely want to go a little further in. One being, when it comes to, I want to know your thought because I've heard an argument for both sides of the case on these two pieces of the resume. One is the executive summary or the summary. Some people think you should include it, other people think you don't, and how long it should be. But also one that I've had debated recently because I added something to my resume, which is volunteer work. And you mentioned things like, okay, put your interest and so forth. If it could fit, keep it limited to a line or two, that's fine. But say, for example, like if I'm volunteering for another organization and I'm using my skills and experience for that volunteer work to help move that organization forward. Do you think that is valuable, or do you think it's best left off? Keep it to a minimum. What are your thoughts on
Mm, I, I'm a big believer that you should add it. I mean, I'm on the board of an autism foundation and I do a lot of work in terms of charity and volunteering. So it's meaningful to me. A lot of people will say just leave it off. I think the answer though is if you're applying for a company that really values volunteering, that maybe their employees go and volunteer to food bank once a month. And if you do that right now, that means you're probably going to be a better cultural fit than somebody that would just refuse to do that. Not that somebody would refuse to do that, they just may not do that. So I think it just depends on the company and what their values are. And if they really push philanthropy and really push volunteering and charity work, I would put it on there. In terms of the executive summary, absolutely. I think it's an absolute must. And the big reason when you look at a job description, it gives a summary of that job. I would try and match those up a little bit, because that's a good way to just match those keywords up a little bit, and you don't have to change the body of your resume. You can just change that executive summary, because if you say I'm looking for a very specific, like I do a lot of financial services and asset management roles, and if somebody says I want to be a senior fixed income portfolio manager at a fund in Chicago and lead a team, and whatever they say in the executive summary, and if they're applying for something that is outside of that, well, that doesn't go towards what they want in their career. But if you say exactly what your kind of career goals are, and it aligns to that role, and it's the next step, then they know that you're a career person, and this is a natural transition for you, and it's what you want. But if you just put, I'm looking for a team that's going to value my background, and I'm going to work really hard, then just omit the executive summary. That doesn't tell them anything. So I think you have to be very specific and career oriented on that executive summary. But if it's just some fluff, just take it off. But again, I think the volunteering work, it's such a personal choice, I think, to put it or not. I see value in it. If you're applying for a nonprofit, then yeah, absolutely,
Right.
you put it on there. But if you're going for a company where it just doesn't have that same emphasis, I would wait to bring it up in the interview, because then you've got a little bit of an ace up your sleeve, where you need to have something that's not on the resume to bring up in the interview, because then they're going to say, oh, I didn't know you have that experience. Based off of your resume, I learned a little bit, something new about you. So I would bring it up in the interview. But if you don't want to put it on your resume, that's fine. It just depends on the company. So I know it's kind of it depends answer, but again, some companies value it, some companies don't. You have to figure out if they value it, then I would add it.
Certainly. And I think that's important to know. A lot of people, like I said, might be using their skills and experience in a philanthropic way. And so from that standpoint, depending on the context of the role that you're looking for, the organization, I think it could provide value to some people. And I've had it come up in interviews before as well. I kind of lead into my next question with, one of the things that you brought up previously was, the fear of ageism. I know I'm starting to get 40 plus, and I know that's a concern for a lot of people who, are trying to navigate the job market now and realizing that there's a lot of competition out there. And it's not that their skills and experience aren't valid or aren't relevant, but it seems almost as if, and you can give me your own perspective, but it seems as almost as if, a lot of companies find it easier to kind of move away from some of the older talent, some of the 40 plus talent, move them out and kind of, it's more affordable to have someone who has a little less experience in the same type of field, or might be a little less knowledgeable about the salary bands in that particular industry, and so aren't necessarily asking for the same salary amount when it comes to the same positions.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing that across the board, or is it more of an issue of the organizations themselves? Do you see it as an issue with job seekers? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, because certain jobs have very specific salary bands. And if you're, say, 45 years old, right, and you've got 20 plus years of experience, and they're just looking for 10 years of experience, and you say, well, I can do this job in my sleep, you're probably applying for the wrong job then. Because if somebody is lower on the experience range, fits better financially, there's more room for growth. So I think with people thinking that there's an age bias, and there definitely is, there's nothing we can do about that. I think a lot of companies are under the impression, are they willing to roll up their sleeves, or are they going to have the mentality of, that's beneath me, I have way more experience than that, I can add more value than just that piece of the job. And so you just have to just hit it head on and say, hey, I want to roll up my sleeves. I want to be in the trenches here. In terms of that salary, though, if it's not a match, just say, if there's something more senior that comes up, I appreciate keeping me in mind. But I wouldn't just settle for a job to have a job if it's not going to be a fit and they're looking for somebody with 5 to 10 years experience. If that's what it says on the job description, that's what they're telling you, and you have 30 years of experience, I think expectations are just not aligned there. So the days of hiring people that are just figureheads and in leadership roles, I think those are starting to fade away quite a bit. It's, hey, who can just roll up their sleeves and do the job? And we're going to give that opportunity to somebody that might have a chip on their shoulder and say, I've never done this before, but they've got the foundation to move into this role. Companies, I think, have that mentality a little bit more, and not that they're cheap and they don't want to pay that more senior person, but you have to always think, yes, I have this experience, but who am I competing against that's going to have similar experience? Are they going to be, younger, so to say? Are they going to be at the same age range? Great. How can I set myself apart then if they're all, around 45 to 50 years old? Or am I competing up against a bunch of people that are 30 to 45 years old? We try not to use age in terms of, just HR in general, but, from an experience standpoint, you just have to know where your experience is going to be valued. And if, you're 40 plus, I mean, I'm in that category too, unfortunately. You just have to know, if they're looking for somebody that's, 30 and looking to make, 200K, and you're 40 looking to make 400K, there's a huge disconnect there. And so you just have to know where to focus your efforts more than anything. So the ageism, the age bias, age discrimination, it's going to happen, but I think it's just a misalignment on what the role is really looking for and what you can bring to the table. Go for a more senior role, obviously, if that role is too junior for you. But at the same time, you have to be realistic about, if you haven't been working in 6 months or a year, and after 6 months, you're not unemployed, you're out of the workforce, which are two separate categories in terms of how they track people not working. And so you have to think, what's going to get my foot in the door to kind of jumpstart my career again? Am I willing to take a little step back financially? Just tell them that there's no shame in that. They're automatically thinking that you're looking for a boost up from where you left your last current job. But if you say, hey, I want to work for your company, and I know in the next 5 years, the next 6 months to a year is not going to move the needle financially for me, but in 5 years, I know it's going to pay off. Just tell them that. Just the more direct you can be, the more they kind of look at that age bias and get over it. But again, it's always going to be in the back of hiring managers' heads. There's nothing you can do about it. I'm guilty of that too. I mean, if I see somebody that, is graduated in the 70s or the 60s, God forbid, I mean,
And I
they're
think,
thinking they're going to retire in the next couple of years. So you just have to be honest with yourself and say, am I looking for a place to go for the next 20, 30 years and work? Or a lot of companies are thinking, I think they're going to retire in 4 to 5 years. Let's look at somebody that's got a longer runway here, and depending on what their company objectives are too. Um, so again, it really just depends. But if somebody is looking for more of like an advisor role, you want that extra experience. You want as much experience as you can get. If they're advising the CEO of somebody who's done that, been there, and can advise them on a lot of difficult and complex topics. So it just depends on the role as well.
yeah, and I think that's the challenging part that a lot of people are seeing right now, especially in the older age group, where you have, 15, 20 years of experience possibly, but you're not necessarily ready to retire either anytime soon. So you're kind of almost caught in the middle. And to a certain extent, you do have to for lack of a better phrase, bite the bullet and maybe take a step back. And a lot of people I think are willing to, especially those that have been in the job market for an extended period. I think a lot of people are willing to, maybe take a little less money or take a lesser role when it comes to title, or so to speak. So, but that doesn't mean but at the same time, you still got to compete with other people who are on the come up and on emerging in your industry and those types of things, and so you have to stay to a certain extent relevant and knowledgeable and the latest and greatest in
Mhm.
whatever your industry is.
Yeah, and let me go off of that one other thing, one little trick to put people at ease. Typically, a lot of folks are going to say, "What skill set have you been working on recently?" They are automatically under the impression if somebody's got 30 years of experience, they just haven't progressed a whole lot in the last 10 years. They're probably not doing a whole lot of continuing education. Whether they are or not, that's just the impression that companies are going to have. I would just be taking a class that's very relevant today and say, I'm working on a data and analytics certificate, or I'm looking at an LLM, a large language model class to help with my AI skills. Something where they're going to have that aha moment of, okay, that's great. They're continuing to work on themselves. That's all they want to know is, are you continuing to progress in your skill set and mentally challenging yourself? Then age, it doesn't matter. Then you can kind of weaponize the fact that you're improving yourself continuously, not just, you know, kind of flatlining the last couple of years, because that's immediately what they're going to think. If you've got 40, 50 years of experience, I mean, they're going to think you've just been status quo for a long time. So before you start interviewing, getting serious for a job search, try and find a class that's going to be relevant today and bring it up immediately, because people are going to know, okay, he's working on himself or herself and continuing to progress intellectually. So that's just one tip that I would always recommend.
Certainly, and I've actually done that for myself, taking courses over throughout my career just to keep myself as knowledgeable and experienced as possible. Currently doing a self-guided generative AI course at the moment, so
Oh,
uh,
nice.
absolutely, those types of things. It's like it's either going to pass us by, or we're going to, learn about it and make use of it as best as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I know a lot of job seekers are also seeing in the market right now are, you know, I guess what's the easiest way to say it? Ghosting. A lot of times they'll go through the process. They might have one or two interviews, sometimes three or four interviews, and think they're progressing through the interview process, and all of a sudden it's crickets and they don't hear anything back, or they just kind of fell off the face of the earth and haven't heard any kind of response from the organization itself, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And it's like, okay, I'm left hanging. It's been 2 weeks. Do I send a follow-up? And I haven't heard from my follow-up, just reaching out type of thing. What do you see from your standpoint as a recruiter? Like, how often is this happening? Do you have a process to kind of, try to avoid this? And I know it's, to an extent, you can't reach out to, say, for example, 499 people that didn't get the job personally. But from my perspective, if you've been through a significant process of at least, going through one or two rounds, and you've spoken with the recruiter and you've maybe spoken with the hiring manager, and hey, maybe they chose to go in a different direction, which is fine, but not hearing anything back is really, I think, frustrating and demoralizing for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of job seekers. What do you say to that, as far as, from the hiring manager side, and how do you kind of make it easier for the job seeker when they're going through some of those mentally frustrating type of situations?
Yeah, it can be crushing and demoralizing as a candidate. I always say time kills all deals. If you haven't heard back in 2 to 3 weeks, they're just probably not going to move forward. A trick that I always tell candidates is make one last ultimatum and send some sort of note. I want this job. If you guys want to move forward, I'd like to hear from you by XYZ date, just an update. And if they're still deciding internally, that's fine. But I would just send that note and then just move on to something else. There's no reason to let that fester. But I had this happen maybe 2 or 3 years ago where a client was hiring for a COO, it was a big job, and they just completely ghosted um, the two candidates at the end, and it was very, very frustrating because these were senior level people. And then I sat down with them and I said, if they're gonna not give you any feedback and just completely ghost you, that's not an organization that you probably want to work at. So you have to think about it big picture. You might have dodged a bullet there, because if they don't have a process and they're not getting back to you, is that a place you really want to be? But at the same time, you just want a definitive answer. And so, if they're just never going to get back to you as a hiring manager or an interviewer, sure, it's rude to do that, and things might slip and you might forget about, candidate feedback or getting back to people. I get it. It's going to happen. You can't get back to everybody depending on how much you're growing and scaling. But at the same time, you just need to give a definitive no. And unfortunately, a lot of people are just, you know, shy to tell somebody you didn't get the job. And, it's sad to think that people just won't pick up the phone and say, we're not moving forward. They're just not going to pick up the phone because they're too shy to do that. And that's a big thing that we deal with. But from the candidate side, you have to know your worth and say, if they're not getting back to me, I'm going to send one final note. Hey, I thought the interview went very well. My skill set, I think, can solve this problem in XYZ fashion. I haven't heard anything in the last 3 weeks. If I don't hear anything by next Friday, I'll assume you've gone with a different candidate. In the meantime, I'd be very interested to move forward and I'd love to work with your company. Be done with it, go on to the next thing. But don't let it sit there, because, the more you stay up at night thinking, well, I haven't heard back from them, you may never hear back from them is the answer. And you have to assume that you're never going to hear back from them. So it just depends on how many job processes you're in too, because if you're working with a retained firm, if they have the 3 finalists, if you're meeting with the CEO, board members, there's going to be a very definitive decision call, if you will. If you're just kind of doing it on your own and don't have another person to hold accountable in the process, the companies use that as an excuse to say, that's fine. If we're not going to hire this person ever in the future, we're just never going to call them. It's a poor candidate experience, but again, I think it speaks volumes about the company and just their infrastructure and process. So you have to say, if they're not willing to get back to me, that just says a lot about them. Maybe I should be looking elsewhere. So again, it's
Certainly.
managing expectations, but ghosting, it happens a lot. I mean, I get ghosted on interviews for candidates all the time. I'll set up a candidate interview, carve out an hour and a half sometimes. I'll be sitting on the video call and they just don't show up, and they'll just never call or email me back. It happens way more than you'd think. And it drives me crazy. There's nothing I can do about it other than just complain. But it happens, and it's unfortunate. And I flagged candidates in the system that have done that, and it actually came back to bite a candidate. That's a whole nother story. But I think it's just a matter of declining a candidate. That's a 30-second phone call. That's not a 10-minute phone call. It's, hey, it's Rob calling. Just to let you know they're going with a different candidate. Happy to stay in touch about future opportunities. It can be that brief, right? Or, hey, the feedback is the other person just had a couple more years of experience, or the location is better for this person, or this person had a different certification, whatever it is. Give them the actual reason, and then say, let's just stay in touch for future opportunities. Have a great day. It takes 30 seconds. Not many people are doing that though, but not many people are comfortable telling somebody no. That's just kind of human nature.
Yeah, and I see that a lot, and I really, I've been on both sides of it as well and have experienced every range of it, I believe, at this point. And my thoughts on it are, if they took the time to say, hey, you know what, unfortunately they chose to go in a different direction. I don't expect I used to want feedback because I like constructive criticism, regardless of what it is. Like, hey, was there something I said or something I did in the interview process? But I realize now in 2026, I'm probably not going to get that level of detail when it comes to feedback. However, if they take the time to reach out to me and say, hey, they've gone in a different direction, or there was another candidate selected, I might be frustrated in that moment, but I'll make a note of that recruiter or that organization to say, okay, this was something that I can, possibly reach back out on if I see another opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Or I feel comfortable. I'm not pissed off at the situation because I didn't hear anything back.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah,
I really take a note of that. I'm like, okay, you know what? I can respect that. It is what it is. I move on. But I try not to, especially, it's almost kind of like dating. It's like, you got to just move on to the next one. If, hey, sometimes it's matched, sometimes it's not.
Hmm.
And that's fine. But, having that quick 30 seconds of closure that says, okay, you know what, maybe it wasn't the right fit or for whatever reason, just an acknowledgement of that so that I can have peace of mind to move forward and not feel like I screwed something up, or, it could just be a cultural fit. It could be a whatever. There's all kinds of reasons, but, and I recognize that from a legal standpoint, they probably don't want to give all their reasons, whatever those might be. But, you know, the fact that they took the time to say, hey, whether it's a written email, you can tell when an email is either handwritten by a recruiter or if it's just an automated, thing that they put out to the
Hmm.
general masses of whoever applied.
Right.
Or they picked up the phone to tell me, hey, we were going to schedule another one, but they chose this other candidate. Just wanted to let you know, and we'll keep in touch, kind of thing. And that's fine. I can appreciate that. And like I said, I'll make a note of it, or that organization to say, okay, I can feel comfortable applying again, and maybe I'll have a better shot next time.
Well, and a good example in banking, they flag it under reputational risk. And so if you're not giving feedback and not declining people, it is going to hurt your future candidate pool, because those 499 people that didn't get the job, what are they saying about you as an employer on the job market? And if they're saying that a really bad experience or they got ghosted, other people are not going to be interested in your company in the future because of that. And so word of mouth gets out. A quick email. I mean, Google is kind of the standard in terms of a lot of hiring processes for people. If you apply for a job, you'll always get an email that says we're not moving forward 100% of the time. And so, yeah, great, I didn't get the job, but it would be a great place to work. So let me see if there's something in the future. That's the feeling you want to walk away from an interview process, especially if you interview, get to the end, and then don't move forward. If it was a really good process, you're going to say, hey, if something else comes up, I'd be interested. That might happen a week later. It could happen a month later. It could happen years later, but you're still top of mind. But if you just never hear back and they call you a year later and say, I've got another job for you, you're probably going to say, I'm not interested based off of the last experience that I had. So you have to think down the road. It's not just the job right now that companies are hiring for. How do they make sure people are interested in future jobs too? And it's just that reputation risk. So you have to be mindful of it.
Certainly. And I can absolutely, from a job seeker standpoint, we're, constantly making sure that we put our best foot forward. And I think it should be the same way from from the employer side. Like, hey, I want to see what you guys have to offer. I want to see, if this is a good organization to be a part of, if this is something that, aligns with my personal values. So, I I tell my daughter, I'm like, hey, you're interviewing that company as well. They're not just interviewing you. And if that's a place that you don't want to be around, if that's not an environment that feels comfortable for you to work in on a day-to-day basis, probably don't want to work there. You probably don't want to finish that process.
Mm-hmm.
And to an extent, you can go to Glassdoor, you can see the reviews and so forth, and you take those with a grain of salt. I'm sure a lot of people will go on there and vent their frustrations and
Yeah, it's all
like
disgruntled employees down there. It's funny to. I read those if I need a laugh every now and then.
absolutely, but to an extent, it's also just it's keeping aware of the latest and greatest in your industry. Every industry is, I think, a little different, and so when you keep your ear to some of the happenings that are going on as far as layoffs or as far as company culture goes, you can kind of get a sense of, hey, is this a good place to work at? And that's one thing that I definitely value LinkedIn on, as far as just making connections and saying, hey, what was your experience here like? I know there's been times where I've recommended places that I used to work, and maybe times where I've recommended, hey, this might not be the best fit for you for XYZ reason. So
Mm-hmm.
word of mouth, I think, is definitely something that is taken for granted
Mm-hmm.
to an extent as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I think you have to
how
look at one quick note on that. I think you can't look at the one-off experiences too. Look at the patterns that you see with companies, and if there's a pattern of, a poor candidate experience, that says one thing. But if there's 100 people saying great things, then just a handful who didn't have a good experience, that's probably just one manager that rubbed somebody the wrong way. So you just have to again take it with a grain of salt, know who the good places are to try and go after and get hired and work with. And I always say work with, not work for. Depends on, you can tell by the language of a company of how they're going to value you. If you say, you will do this for me, you'll do that for me, as opposed to we will work together on this and we'll work together on that. There's subtle differences that you can tell if it's a good place to work or not. So those, the Glassdoor, all those places, look for the patterns, and you can tell if it's going to be a good candidate experience typically.
I can appreciate that. So I'll tell you what, I don't want to keep too much of your time. I'll let you, one thing I like to do is kind of ask people, what do you say to people who are currently job seeking, who are currently in the market right now? What is one last thing that you would like to give them as a bit of advice, support, or encouragement? Last word for anybody who's out there currently dealing with the market right now.
Yeah, I'd say hang in there. It's a grueling process to find a job. It really is. And I think you have to keep in mind too, everybody says, I'm not working, I need to find a job immediately. And then you're just going to take the first thing that comes your way. Even if you're not working right now, be selective, be picky, make sure it's a place you actually want to spend for your career. Because I used to tell candidates there's only two things you should even consider in a job search. One is, what are you actually going to be doing in the role? And if it's something that's going to grow your skill set, expand you personally and professionally, that's the category you want to be in. You don't want to just do something you've been doing forever and it's just, you feel complacent. That's number one. And the second one is, who are you doing that with? And you have to surround yourself with people that are going to motivate you and elevate you and challenge you. And if those two things line up, the money will come, the promotions will be there. Everything else will fall into place, but you really have to like the day to day. It's really got to challenge you. And you have to like who you're doing that with, because you're spending, I was going to say 8 hours a day with these people. It's more like 10 to 12 now, more than anything. And so you just really have to enjoy the people that you work with. And that's the hardest thing to identify. So don't just take the first job that comes your way, or else you're going to have regret. You're going to move around every 3 to 6 months, and that's just worst case scenario. So really evaluate the opportunity. Make sure it's a place you can see yourself growing and developing over the next couple of years, and then just go all in. I think a lot of people tend to say, okay, the first month or two, I'll give it a shot. No, you've got to be all in from day one. And if you don't have that feeling, don't take the job.
I think that's really important. And you know what? I'm going to leave it there. I really appreciate your time, Robert. I think this has been a valuable discussion. You've been really giving me some additional tips, so I'm keeping my own personal notes here. So I can certainly appreciate that. I think this has been really a positive experience for me, just as far as talking with you and learning a little bit more about how to put myself out there in a valuable way. So from that standpoint, I really just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a great discussion, and happy to be a resource any way I can. And hopefully everybody has a great rest of the day. And good luck to anybody interviewing coming up. And I know you'll kill it.
Thanks a lot, Robert. You have a great one.
All right, thanks, Aaron.
Bye.